In 1955, Albert Einstein's close friend Michel Besso passed away, only a month before Einstein himself would follow. In a letter of condolence to the man's family, the physicist wrote, "Now he has departed from this strange world a little ahead of me. That means nothing. For us believing physicists, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion." This quote has commonly been misinterpreted as a statement that time itself is an illusion, but notice how the phrase is worded. It's the distinction which Albert states is the illusion. In other words, the linear forward motion of time is unique to our own perception, and all points, past, present, and future, are all equally real, with the concept of the now ever changing depending on the frame of reference. This idea, known now to scientists as block universe theory or eternalism, is grouped together with other B and C theories about the nature of time. Most significantly, eternalism is necessary for the plausibility, however slim, of time travel. The concept of travelling both backwards and forwards through time has been a mainstay of science fiction films and literature for well over a century, but there has never been any substantial evidence discovered that time travel is possible in actuality. At least, not voluntarily. Timeslips are a phenomenon wherein an individual, or in some cases a group of people, are seemingly transported through time, usually to the past, witnessing significant changes in the location of the occurrence, from people dressed in period clothing to antique forms of transport and architecture transforming in front of their very eyes. These inexplicable and seemingly impossible experiences have been reported across the globe, but for some unknown reason, there are an unusually high number of accounts clustered around Bold Street in Liverpool. Here is just one of those tales, posted to Reddit by user ThisIsHugh. A young man named Ciarán, who, while shoplifting in Liverpool back in 2006, ran away from a security guard and headed down Hanover Street. Trying to shake off the guard, Ciarán, 19, turned into a dead-end street called Brooks Alley. By this time, he was out of breath and started to get a tight sensation in his chest. He soon realised that actually it wasn't a problem with him, but the atmosphere around him. He waited for the guard to come around the corner after him, but he never appeared. So, thinking he had given the guard the slip, Ciarán sauntered back out and started to walk down Hanover Street again, but he soon realised that something was very wrong. The road looked different, and so did the pavement. He noticed cars driving by that looked very old-fashioned, and the roadworks that he knew were there were now gone. Soon he saw that the people around him were wearing strange clothes. Crossing over to Bold Street, he noticed that there were traffic lights where there weren't before, and bushes growing around the Lyceum, near a bar that he recognised. He carried on walking, realising that actually something was really odd. Then he began to panic. He realised that somehow he had stepped back in time, and the time slip was not going away. Then he remembered his cell phone. Taking it out of his pocket, he tried to get a signal, but of course, it didn't work. Eventually he began to really panic, but spotted a kiosk selling newspapers and headed over. Leaning over the stand, he took a look at the front page of the Daily Post. There, in bold lettering, was the date. 18th of May, 1967. He wondered what to do. What happens if he can't get back to his own time? What about family and friends? So, speeding up his pace, he reached H. Samuel the jeweller's and tried to phone once again. This time it worked. Sighing with relief, he looked around and realised that he had returned to the present. But the strange thing was, he could still see down the end of the road people walking around in 1967. By this time, Ciarán had seen enough and dived onto a bus to go home. When he was interviewed by the local newspaper later, he stated over 4 times the exact account. But the strange tale didn't end there. When the security guard was interviewed, he stated that when he ran after Sean and turned down the dead-end alley after him, he said that Sean had completely disappeared. One proposed theory for the concentration of time-slip reports on Bold Street was that it lies directly over the electrified underground railway lines. A map showcasing concentric circles of rail tracks surrounding Bold Street was shown in support of this theory. However, this was swiftly debunked when a local pointed out that the map was just a stylized depiction of the railway and the lines weren't actually constructed in this manner, so the mysterious phenomenon on Bold Street remains unexplained. This next tale was posted to the Uncanny UK blog in 2012. The story takes place in King's Lynn, Norfolk, and was experienced by a man called Jack. I just wanted to report my time slip experience, which was experienced by myself, my father, and my sister. It happened in the late 1990s, can't remember exactly when, sorry, in King's Lynn, Norfolk. My dad, sister and I were in the town to send my sister off on the train, and we were passing the time standing by a fence near the railway station, from which one could see a road and a roundabout ahead. It was about noon, and we had had no agenda at the time other than to wait before heading to the station, and there was a lull in the conversation. We were all casually looking straight ahead when suddenly the atmosphere changed. The sound of the traffic around us stopped abruptly, as if someone had literally turned the volume right down. The air seemed to change too. It became very still, spookily still, and no sound could be heard. None of us spoke. Then there came the sound of a horse's hooves on the road, and within a few seconds we saw a horse and cart, driven by a large, angry-looking man, dressed in what I estimate to be 18th century clothes. He was of very rough, dirty appearance, and his cart was well used. He drove the cart around in a circle, all the time staring around, sometimes directly at us, sometimes away, but looking absolutely furious, as though he was looking for someone he wanted to kill. His face was red with hatred, and he was a big, rough-looking man, someone you would definitely not want to cross. Eventually, he turned the horse and cart around and drove it off down the same road from which he had appeared, and we could hear the horse's hooves disappearing in the distance. Immediately, the sound had gone, the atmosphere changed back again, and the sound of modern traffic and the din of modern town returned again. We all three looked at each other, shaken and almost disbelieving, but once we had asked the inevitable, "Did you see that?" and received the answer, yes, we were even more shaken. It was such a peculiar experience, and one which I shall never forget. Strangely, these accounts are not necessarily limited to slipping through time. Some eyewitnesses even claim to have journeyed to another place entirely. This final story was posted to Reddit by user Endless Loops of Y, and takes place near the small village of Frettenham, which, incidentally, is just outside Norfolk. Way back in 2004, I was living with a friend in England. We used to go walking in the countryside, out in the fields and all that. One time we were out walking, we spied a mini forest type thing towards the edge of a field. Curious, we went over to it. As we approached, we noticed a little pathway, or gap in the trees, so we followed it. As we went along through the trees, the pathway became like an archway, as if the trees were growing into the perfect shape over the path. This went on for ages, maybe half an hour. Eventually, we saw daylight at the end, so we powered on along and made it out of the exit into open air. Outside looked normal, countryside, with the exception of a strange settlement before us. It looked like the buildings were made out of junk, well, wooden junk. There were tiny people, 4 foot, maybe 5 foot max, everywhere wearing rags. They were all muddy and unkempt. They stared at my friend and I like we were aliens from another world. There wasn't a road, just a muddy path through the centre of the buildings. No power lines, nothing modern. While standing there, I suddenly had this feeling that I had to leave. I said to my friend that we had better go, so we went back the way we came. It was a pity this happened in 2004, since we didn't have the tech to hand easily that you'd have nowadays to take photos and videos of everything. Anyway, we went back and discussed it a few times in the intervening months. Eventually, I couldn't stand it anymore and convinced my friend that we had to go back with the digital camera. When we returned, we found the trees and the entrance, but when we followed the path, it lasted a few minutes and emerged into another field, a normal field. We walked the perimeter of the trees. Turned out to be just a little square of undeveloped, unused land in the middle of 4 fields. No archway, no village. Suffice to say, there was no point taking photos. I'm convinced to this day that if we hadn't left when we did, we'd still be there, wherever or whenever there is to this day. Another missing persons report. Rarely, if ever, are ghosts considered to be time travellers from the past. Rather, as popularised in late 19th century spiritualism, they are souls trapped in the present, but chained to the time in which they died. In many stories, unaware that the world has moved on. It's a strange notion then, that Timeslips are like inverted ghost stories, instead of an out-of-place entity from the past appearing in our perceived present. We are these misplaced wanderers, involuntary immigrants in the foreign country. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.